Okay, so I think that we can start. Can you all hear me? Right, okay. So I'm not the kind of guy who like talks too much. So hi everyone. Thank you for being here to the third lesson of the Urbe Campus. You may be wondering why Fabrizio isn't here and why his hair may be grown, but I'm Paolo, also known on the web as Orbulo. I'm one of the co-founders of the Urbe community, of the ETHRome Hackathon, and as well also I'm a co-founder of Brian, which is an AI Web3 startup that I'm working on. But today I'm here mainly because I'm an hacker, not this kind of hacker, but rather this kind of hacker, the guy that sleeps during hackathons. And but what does really hacker mean? So I really love this definition of hacker. Actually, I have it on the back of my iPhone as well. And hacker means an individual which is capable of solving complex, non-intuitive problems in a seemingly intuitive manner. It may seem complex as a definition, but in reality, it means someone who has the creativity and loves basically what he does and is capable of solving problems. So this is a little bit of flexing of some of the hackathons that I've been with. I've participated at 10 Web3 hackathons. I've won more than 40 bounties, around $50,000 in prizes, and just around 6 hours of sleep in all the hackathons. So this is another map of all the places that I've visited while hacking. And this is why I really love hacking as well. And I would like you to start considering also as well to start hacking. You can see some countries like the USA. I've been in Denver, for example, France, Spain, South Korea, Poland, Turkey, and so on. But you may think and ask, what do you do at hackathons? What's your job? What's the actual code that you develop? So my job at hackathons, while working with Limone, who's in the backside, I mainly do the front end. So how many of you are like know what front end development is? Okay, so someone doesn't, someone doesn't. Okay. And how many of you remember the word art? Is old enough to remember this kind of art as well? Okay, not so many. So a little bit of history. When I started developing, I was a backend developer, and I really hated frontend. Like I really, really, really hated frontend. And but why? Because while working on the backend, you basically just read and transform data. So backend is what happens basically behind the curtain of the web. And so that's it. That's pretty easy. Of course, there are some really complex backends. You need to handle a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, it's just basically reading and transforming data. While instead, while working on the front end, you need to account for different browsers, devices, people actually not able to click buttons properly, and much, much more. So it can become frustrating. So that's why those are like the main reasons why I really hated working on front ends. But when I started doing my first front ends, I understood that front end development means making the web a better place. And I think that it's the most creative part of coding, and because you can basically express and you can actually see the code that you are developing, which is something that doesn't happen in the backend. So I think that it's really beautiful. Of course, it takes a lot of creativity, sometimes a lot of design, if there's not someone that works with you and does the design for you, but I think that it's really beautiful. So, and also another thing that brought me to the front-end development side was that being a front-end developer in the Web 2, that was what I was doing basically, transitioning from the Web 2 to the Web 3, it's easier. It's easier. Why? Because the tools of the trade that you use in the Web 3, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript, and so on, are the same. So you basically use the same tools, the same programming languages, the same libraries, like most of the same libraries and frameworks, and as the Web 2. And also in the Web 3, we have a lot of useful libraries for any basically use case of stuff that you want to develop. But most importantly, what I loved about developing front ends in the Web3 and in the blockchain space is that Web3 is complex, and front end development is the only way to make it easy. So it's a huge challenge for any front-end developer to develop websites or native applications and so on to make the Web3 easier. And that's also called and known for the people that work in the Web3 as the UX UI challenge, which stands for user experience, user interface challenge. So what is this challenge? Basically, in Web2, people always know, like most of the times know, with what they are interacting with. So an example that I've written here is that when you click the plus icon in the Instagram app, for example, you already know that you're going to add a new photo, for example, or inside your banking app, if you click on deposit, you know that you're going to deposit some money, okay? That is not the case for the Web3, because in Web3 people can get lost because we have a lot of new concepts like swapping, bridges, DeFi, gas, tokens, and so on and so forth. And so new users especially can get lost in this mess. And so these are like the four sub challenges that I like to call of the UX UI challenge. And the first one that we need to do when we develop any kind of front end in the Web3 is explaining the obvious. What does it mean? It means that even if something for you that you are the one developing this application or thinking about or ideating this application, you always need to explain something that you think it's obvious, because it will not be most of the times for the people that are going to interact with it. The second one is expressing the immutability. I think that Fabrizio told you about the principles and how does the blockchain work, basically. So you should know that the blockchain is immutable. Whatever you do stays there, and so on and so forth. And so when you develop any kind of front end for the Web3, you need to express the fact that any kind of action that the user is actually performing is going to be immutable. Whether, for example, is trading two tokens, when you trade them, there's basically no going back without, of course, doing the opposite transaction. But the third sub-challenge is impressing with creativity without distracting. What does that mean? When you develop front ends in Web3, you need to be creative. You need to be to develop like beautiful front ends, animations, whatever. But you do not need to distract the user from the real functionalities of your app, basically. So if your app does something, you should not like distract them from what you want them to do, basically. And the last one is letting users explore what they're doing. So this is also comes from the property of transparency of the blockchain. So most of the Web3 applications allow users to explore what they're doing and what they have done in the past. And this gives the users the feeling that they are interacting with an application that actually is going to interface with the blockchain. So another few slides and then we'll go to coding. So when you develop a front end or an app in the Web3, those apps are usually called dApps. So dApp, so the app, stands for decentralized application. This was a concept that was born around 2016, 2017, 2015, like around those years, and stands for, as I said, decentralized application. But in the past, it was used to reference applications that were served in a decentralized manner, like making them unstoppable. When we started developing and working in the Web3, we always had this idea of, since the blockchain is unstoppable, it's immutable and so on, so as well the front ends need to be. So that's why there was this concept of having these unstoppable front ends. In reality, today the concept has lightened a lot because due to the need of more complex application, more complex use cases, and with the technology going forward, now the concept of dApp broadly refers to any application that interacts with the blockchain. So when you hear the term dApp, you can think of any application that interacts with any blockchain, basically, whatever that is. So this is what I would like to build our first app. We're going to use the scaffold2, which is a framework, but in reality, I'm going to ask you some questions to understand what's your level, and then we will see basically how to go forward. So let's start coding. So the first question that I have is, how many of you know JavaScript or TypeScript? Okay, so and so. Okay, so for the ones that already know it, it may. How many of you that know JavaScript know React as well? Actually, you can lower your hands, please, because I already know you. So yeah. So what I suggest you, like what we're going to do is that we're going to use this website that I really like, and this is going to be helpful for whoever knows, who doesn't know TypeScript, and then it's also useful, in my opinion, for people that already know TypeScript as well, because it can give you some refresh on how some stuff works. And so these are some exercises that we are going to do. They are really fast, and we're going to see them together. So just for the ones that do not know JavaScript, I hope that you have some concepts of programming languages that are not compiled. So basically, JavaScript is similar to Python. If some of you know Python, I think it's easier to understand. So basically, JavaScript works as a script. So any line of code is executed basically line by line, starting from the start, of course, of the file. You have all the variables, functions that you, of course, have in all the programming languages. And while instead TypeScript is basically, you could imagine it as an extension of JavaScript that makes it more close to strongly typed languages like C++ or Java or whatever. So I think that at the 42 you should be studying something like C++ or I don't know. So what I suggest you is that you go to this website, which is called totaltypescript.com. You can log in using your GitHub if you have one. Otherwise, you can use your email. It's free. So I think that they will send you some spam emails, but you can block them. But that's not my fault, sorry. So if you can register here and then go to the tutorials, and then we will do these really fast exercises on TypeScript. And as I said, they are really, really, really fast, but they will get you to the point of understanding how the language works. And so we can go forward as well. And you can do all the tutorials on your own. Maybe when you are at home, there are some example. This one, Zod, is really useful, or as well, the solving TypeScript errors. But the ones that we are going to see are the beginner's TypeScript, so that everybody is on the same level, basically. And then we will go with the React with TypeScript, so we'll understand what is React and how to start developing using React, because React and other frameworks built on top of React are the state of the art when developing on Web3. Basically, there are, of course, other frameworks, but the most used ones are React and Next, which is the one that we are going to use tomorrow with scaffold.eth, basically. So whenever you are ready and registered, please let me know if you're still doing or not. Everybody okay? So what's really cool about this website is that you have a video, and then you have an exercise, and then you have the solution of the exercise. So we will go real fast with the first ones because they are really easy and we do not want to waste a lot of time. But if you want to do them back on your own, and as I said, I think that there's also some paid stuff here. I think it's worth it. I don't know how much does it cost. It's not sponsored, by the way, so that you know. So what's really cool is that you can execute everything that directly from the browser. So right now you do not need to install anything. It's always ready here, basically. So I hope that you can see. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. Yeah, like this works. So as I was saying before, so TypeScript is like, while I'm speaking, you can try and solve it on your own. here below you have an error, basically, that tells you that this parameter has any type, which is something that can be done in TypeScript, but it's better to specify a type. So in this case, we need to create this function, which is called add two numbers, and we need to define the typing of the A and B parameters. Since we are starting with it, in order to define the parameters the types, of parameters of a functions, you need to put a semicolon, no, a colon, and then you need to define the type. In this case, is number, and we do the same with B. So basically, we are defining that the function add two numbers takes an A, which is a number, and B, which is a number. So I think that we just need to save it, and this should be working just fine. As you can see, one test, type check complete, we finished the exercise. So this was pretty fast. And also below you have some explanation about the exercise, but whatever. We don't need to check the solution. So then the second exercise is related to objects. So TypeScript is, since it's a strongly typed language rather than JavaScript, it works most of the times using objects and using interfaces and so on, which are concepts that are more like native of any object-oriented programming language. And as I said, we're going to go real fast with these ones. And so in this case, we have the same function, which is add two numbers, but instead, now, instead of taking the A and B parameters as before, you have the params.first and params.second. So these dot notation in JavaScript and TypeScript, of course, I will just say TypeScript so it's easier for me. Otherwise, I'll go mad in a couple of minutes. So this dot notation means that we are accessing in this case, the first variable and the second variable inside these params. And as we did before, in order to define the type, because it's what we're doing right now, we are going to say that params is an object, and we are going to use the, what are they called in English? I don't remember. Yeah, the curly brackets, thank you. And we're going to define it as an object containing the first variable, which is a number, and then the second variable, which is a number as well. As you can see, it's not going to complain, and it's going to say that, hopefully when it stops running all these tests, it should say that it works. So basically what we have done in the first exercise and in the second one, we define the types of an object. And as you can see, it's like, for the ones that doesn't know TypeScript or JavaScript, it's really easy to understand what you're trying to do. So going to the third exercise instead, we are going to get the concept of optional properties. So optional properties is something that you may have inside TypeScript objects. And it's something that it's not, I think that not so many programming languages have them. Like when you define an object, it's either null or it has a value. Instead, in JavaScript, you have, basically you can have null, you can have the actual value, and you can have a third type, which is called undefined. So it's basically when the value is not defined, as the name says, basically. And so in this case, as you can see here, if we keep this object defined this way, so with first defined as a string and last as a string, when we try to pass only the first attribute, which in this case is met, is going to complain because we are not passing also the last, because this is something that you should not be doing. But if I put test here, it works because it wants also the second property, but we cannot edit the tests. And so in order to set a variable as optional, what you do is you put the question mark after the name of the variable, and that marks it as optional, basically. So it's really easy. So it's like last as a question. So I don't know why it's complaining, but this should work. So So yeah, so adding this question mark sets any property as optional. We're going to see this other exercise, which is also on optional parameters, which is something that you will find a lot inside either libraries or when you're trying to develop any kind of front end. You will do a lot of checks on optional variables because it's something really, really common during TypeScript development. So this exercise is pretty much like the last one. You just need to add a question mark on the name of the variables as we saw before, and it basically works. So this last, in this case, if it's not passed, it's like calling this function like this, basically. Const name, Paolo, undefined. So when you don't pass it, in reality, the value that is getting passed to the function, it's undefined. So the third exercise is assigning types to variables. So in this case, we have a question. So how do we ensure that default user is the type of user at this line and not further down in the code? So what does that mean? In TypeScript, as a strongly typed language, you can assign the variable can get its typing in two ways. The first way it can get its type, it's when it gets inferred. So if you have a variable and you assign it the value of a known type, so a number, you don't need to actually specify the type of that variable. So in this case, if I put 3 here, I know that default user, it's a number, okay? But when we are dealing with types, with custom types and objects and so on, if you do something like this, actually this default user, it's not any kind of specified type, it's just empty brackets. So we need to assign to this variable its type, which in this case it's user. And as you can see, it's going to complain because when we set it the user type, the user type has no optional parameters, and so in this case we need to also assign the ID, the first name, the last name, and the isAdmin. So we're going to set the ID to 1, the first name to whatever you want.
So basically the object in TypeScript are not nullable. Like I cannot declare just an empty user.
You can, but an empty user is like it's like user does not exist as null. Okay, so you need to specify that it's user or null in this case, but we're going to see this notation later, basically. You can do something like this, but it would only work if everything over here was optional. In this case, it works, but just one single required property, of course, and you cannot do it anymore. So in this case, we are going to just go real fast. This should be Rollo and isAdmin. Of course, it's true. Okay, so that as well was really easy. Okay, so let's go to the next exercise. So this exercise is regarding the constraint of value type. So what is really cool in TypeScript is that you can constrain the type of a property or a variable to some fixed values. In this case, we have this question, which is how do we ensure that the role is only one of admin, user, and superadmin? In this case, both like admin, user, and superadmin are strings. So in this case, this is correct. Like actually, role is a string. But as you can see, we have this, well, this notation over here is used to expect an error in this case, and it's red because there's no error, because I should not be allowed is actually a string. So there's nothing wrong over here, okay? in order to constrain this value, something which is really cool in TypeScript is that you can directly say that role, for example, needs to be admin, or role needs to be user, or role needs to be super admin. So only the value that you're specifying here works. But of course, we need to support admin and user as well. So we are going to use the, what is this word? The or operator, or like, I don't know how it's called, intersection operator, I think. And basically, we are going to say that the variable role, it's either admin, user, or super admin. Okay? And as you can see, when you go and have this IntelliSense over here, it tells you already, even the editor tells you that user.role can only be admin, user, and super admin. And as you can see, this expect error now works. And if I remove it, this is an error because the type I should not be allowed is not assignable to the type, which is either admin, user, or super admin, basically. And this is really useful because you can, like, something that is really powerful about TypeScript, which is really bad in JavaScript and also Python as well, is the fact that since those languages are not strongly typed, you may incur in errors like when the code is running and not when the code, for example, is being developed. Okay, while TypeScript provides us to have the flexibility and the easier development of JavaScript, while at the same time having the strengths of any strongly typed language. So in this case, if I know that all the users inside my application either have the admin role or the user role, I can define it this way. And so while developing the code, if in any part of the code I'm trying to pass something which is not admin or not user, I'm going to get an error also during compilation as well. So it's really useful to use types. So the next exercise instead is regarding arrays, which are lists. Hopefully all of you are familiar with arrays. Let's see if we have a question. And so, yeah. In order to define arrays, as you can see, we have this interface user over here, which has an ID, first name, and blah, 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 and then we have these posts. Then we have another interface, which is a way of defining types of a post. Of course, when we try to create this user, the post needs to be an array, while instead here it's defined as an object. So the way to define an array of any given type is just to add brackets, square brackets. Why I can't remember the name of the brackets today. So you just add the square brackets after the name of the type, and basically you are saying that this posts parameter inside the user, it's an array of posts, basically. So that's how you define arrays, array typings in TypeScript. What is really cool also in TypeScript is that you can say, like you can express it's the wrong word. You can annotate any function and tell and say what is the return type of that function, which is not like you're not forced to do it, but if you already know that that function will always return that given type, it's something to do, because in this way you can always check that you are not doing something wrong, basically. And so in this case we have the same structure as before. Well, now you can also define arrays like this, but whatever, I don't like it. But so the question here is, how do we ensure that make user always returns a user? And in this case, it's as we done already before with properties, with function parameters. And what you need to do is simply the column and then say that this is going to return a user. So in this case, as you can see, the make user function now returns an error. Before, without this function was completely fine. And if you go over here, you see that this is a function that returns basically empty brackets. While like this, we need to return an user. So we need to edit this return value and say, okay, this is 1, and whatever. We are going to put this real fast as well so that we don't lose any time. We put the admin. Now this wants everything to be completed, but which was title, I think. Okay, so we need to populate it with at least one post because the test here is checking for the first post. And oops, and this works fine. So as you can see in TypeScript, you can also annotate not only the parameters of a function, but also the return value itself. Now there's a there's this concept in JavaScript and TypeScript of promises and async requests. So to explain this concept to the people that do not know JavaScript, so basically, how does JavaScript, or like in this case, let's get Node.js, which is one of the, basically, we could call it framework, but whatever, it has many names, where JavaScript runs on. So the Node.js is basically a loop that goes around and around, basically, and it executes code, okay? In JavaScript, there's this concept of promises, which is basically code that does not block the main loop. So it's code that runs in the background, but it's not really in the background. But let's not go too deep in that, because we will need to have a whole day talking about promises. But it's basically code that you can let it run, and you could either wait for its result or just let it go. Like whatever it happens, okay? And promises and requests as well, which I hope that at least some of you have already done some API requests as well. They are always done using this async and the await, which was the keyword that I was using before. Await basically tells JavaScript to wait for that given promise. So do not let it run basically as it is, but when it finishes, I want the result right away. So in this case, this is a function that is going to fetch Luke Skywalker. I don't know how, but there's this API where you can fetch data, and fetch is the function that it's the native one in JavaScript that allows you to make requests. If you don't specify any options, it's just a get request. So it's like calling it in the browser. And as you can see, it's going to return all this data of Luke Skywalker. And it's pretty simple, but in this case, so we are not going too deep about it, but we need to specify that the result of this function is a promise of receiving a Luke Skywalker object. Okay, so think about what I was saying before about executing some code and then something happens and the result is going to come. That's the concept of promise, because you're going to execute this function and I'm going to promise that I will give you this kind of object. That's how I like to think about promises in JavaScript, but let's not go too deep into this argument. So in order to define a promise of something, as you can see, the interface of promise gets this parameter t, which t is a keyword in Java, in TypeScript, that means a type. So when you define promise, you're going to define promise with the type that you specify inside the I don't, why I'm forgetting English, but whatever, you get the point. You say promise and then Luke Skywalker. Then I don't remember all the exercises, so we're going to do some of them together as well. So let's see. So in this case, we have a set. So what is a set? A set, I don't know if any of you is already familiar with the concept of set, but a set is an array that does not contain duplicate objects. So there cannot be duplicate objects inside a set, basically. And in this case, we have a set of string because we are adding, in this case, Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton. And as you can see, we have this test, and this says this should give a type error when you try to pass a non-string. So in order to solve this first one, as you can see, we have this, when you call new set, which I think you should be familiar with creating objects in other languages, use the new keyword, and then you create a new set. When you, in TypeScript, you can also, for some objects, like the promise, for example, you can specify what type this, in this case, the set, like the items of the set need to be. And as you can see, in this case, we have new, unknown. So it's unknown what's the type of the object that it's going to be in, and instead it's going to be inferred later because we are going to add, in this case, strings, but it does not return an error if you add different values. And as we did before with promises, we are going to specify that this is a set of strings, in this case. So only strings can be allowed inside this set. And of course, you can do strings, you could do numbers, and so on, but this is going to give a type error when you try to pass a non-string. And whatever, this is a test that checks whatever. It works, by the way. So we saw also how to create these objects while specifying the type inside of it, in this case for the set or for the promises. Instead, in the next exercise, we are going to see how to assign dynamic keys. So dynamic keys also, it's a really, really nice concept inside TypeScript. And so basically, let's see what this function does. So this function has a cache. So a cache is basically an object, a storage most of the time, which is temporary in memory and so on, where you store data, and then you can also retrieve or delete data from that storage. In this case, this create cache function is going to return an object containing the cache itself, the add and the remove function, because inside an object in TypeScript, you can also have properties that are defined as functions, okay? And so if we see this should add values to the cache, is going to add the key, because a cache is a key value storage. So you associate to a given key a given object or value. In this case, we're going to see that the add function here has a string for the ID and a string for the value. So we could specify the type of this cache in this way, where I think it should be like, no, it not should be like this, which is really funny if I don't remember how to type this one. Okay, so I actually don't remember how to do this, which is really funny. But so basically, let's see the solution otherwise. So, okay, you could use this kind of, okay, so it makes sense. So I wanted to do it in a more fancy way. So there's a way to define objects which is called a record, which basically a record is a dictionary in Python, for example, or in other programming languages. I don't remember how it's called. And so basically you say that this cache is basically an object, a record, which is a key value storage. The first type that you pass is the type of the key, and the second value that you pass is the type of the value that you are going to associate to it. So in this case, we're going to say that the cache, as we said before, needs to accept a string key and a string value. In this case, we define it like this, and this should work. So this is another way to define, which it's not really variable, but whatever. So union types. Let's see what's the error over here. So we have this function, which is called course amount, and should return the amount when passed as an object, and should return the amount when passed as a number. So basically, this function should always return a number, whether we pass the amount as a number or this type, where amount is a property, basically. So this can be done in multiple ways in JavaScript. The easier one, I think so, is by type checking. So in TypeScript, there's this function which is called type of is equal to number. We are going to return the amount. Otherwise, we are going to return, should be like this, right? Yeah. So what we're doing is we are checking if the type of amount it's equal to the string number, in this case, because type of and then a variable returns a string. And so we say if the type of amount is strictly equal, which is 3 equal signs. I think only JavaScript has those. I don't think that other languages have them, but I may be wrong. But is strictly equal to the string number, then we simply return the amount value in this case. While instead, of course, if it's not a number, it's an object in this case. And so we're going to return the amount property of that given object. And as you can see, this works. Let's see if there should be also other solutions. Of course, you can do it like this. You can check in the other way. So you could check if the type of amount it's an object and then return the property. Otherwise, return the amount. This is what we have done. And also there's this way where you could check directly the property of the object, because you could like amount, if you pass a number, it's going to be undefined, because even amount in reality it's an object. And so you could return the amount or the amount directly. Then in like all the programming languages, like with the most advanced ones, of course we have errors as well, and errors are thrown by using this line over here. You could also specify custom errors, but I don't think that it should be over here. Yeah. And so in this case, we have this function where if we pass fail as an input, it's going to throw an error. What you can do is that use this try catch statement. Of course, it should be, I don't know if any of you has never seen a try catch statement, but hopefully you have seen it. So basically what a try catch statement does is that it tries to execute the code inside the try brackets, and then it's going to catch any error. In TypeScript, you can specify the kind of error, like the kind of type of error that you are catching. In this case, we are throwing a generic error, so we can specify over here that the type of what? Why this wants it to be like this? Okay, yeah, it makes sense because error is a generic. Okay, so errors can be, as I said, typed. This any over here is a type that can be used in TypeScript. I say can because it's not the best thing to do, because any means literally anything. So TypeScript has this concept of a configuration file, which is actually hidden over here, so you cannot see it. But basically inside this configuration file, which is called tsconfig, you can define how the TypeScript compiler is going to behave on your code. And the only place where any is allowed, I think, by default is in try catching. Instead, it should be all, like, you should never basically use it. And yeah, so try to avoid, like, most of the times the any value, because, like, the any type, because it can generate errors while your code is running. Another really interesting concept in TypeScript is interface inheritance. We have seen some types, we have seen users, we have seen posts, and so on. And so something that it's really cool is that, as you can see, we have the user, post, and comment interfaces, and all of these interfaces share the same ID property. Okay, so what we can do is we can create another, like, a starting interface where it has this ID property. We could call it, for example, I don't know, ID object, we could call it. We have this ID object, and then we can say that, well, I would do it with types. Just give me 1 second. Let me know what this does want to do. Okay, so I will show you directly the solution of something over here. So in this case, he is going to call it as base, but the idea is that when you define any interface in TypeScript, you can extend other interfaces. What does the extend does? It tells basically that this user contains all the properties of the base interface, and then the user extends it with the first name and the last name. The post is going to extend it with the title and the body as strings, and the comment as the comment, basically. Yeah. So that was basically inheritance from a starting interface. I don't know why you're saying types, but whatever. So until right now, we have seen mainly, as we said, inheritance types and so on. In this case, we have the same interfaces as before. We have the user and the post, and then we have this function, which tells how do we type this return statement so it's both user and an object of posts. Because, as you can see, we do not have a single interface containing both users and posts. This can be done by saying that this is going to return something like this. So we're going to say user, it's going to return a user and, in this case, so it's not the or that we saw before, but it's going to return a user and an object that contains posts and posts as an array. Of course, you could have a user with posts and so on, which could be, you could do something like this as well without creating a new type. You could do something like this. Oops. And this is going to work in the same way. Or also, if you want to use types, or which is something that I like most, you can also assign what we had before. So this stuff over here, you can assign it as a type. So this is this, like, writing this or this is the same thing, basically. But like this, you can maybe reuse it in your code and so on. But I like doing it like this, basically. So there's multiple ways to do combination of types, basically, to create new types. The best one in reality is what I showed you by creating types. So the user with posts like this, and user with posts over here. So you know that you're always returning the user with posts. Okay, so as he's saying here, we saw inheritance of types, we saw how to combine them. In this exercise, instead, we need to create a new object that only includes the first name and the last name properties. So we have this user, and we need to define this new my type, basically, that only contains first name and last name. We are going to use, should be pick. We're going to use this helper, which is called pick, and pick basically allows you to say, I want to pick from this type, the user. I want to pick the first name and the last name. Should be like this, hopefully. Yeah. So basically, pick allows you to create pick actually the properties that you want to keep from a given type. It's not that common in reality to use pick, but I think that maybe there's something. Okay, there's also omit, which does basically the same thing, but in reverse. So basically give me everything of user except the parameter ID. With pick instead, you say, okay, from the user, I want to pick these ones. So something that needs to be noted, that you should use pick, because pick allows you to have auto completion inside your editor, while omit doesn't. So let's see, we have the last two really fast exercises, and then we will start doing some more complex stuff regarding React. And we have this typing functions problem. I think that we already done something like this, or no? Didn't we already do typing functions? Okay, whatever. So we said we have this. Okay, this is a function. So I'll use this to start explaining a little bit something about the web and the browser and so on. So basically, you can see that we are currently calling this object, which is window. So window is an object that is injected inside. Let me rephrase that, because otherwise you will get it wrong. So basically, when you run JavaScript, JavaScript can be run both in the backend using, for example, Node.js and other stuff, but of course it can also be run in the browser. That's why most of the websites are using JavaScript. When you run JavaScript in the browser, you have this object which is called window, and window is exactly what you imagine, is the browser window where that code is actually running. And so it's an object that has a lot of properties, a lot of cool functions and so on. And what you can do, what was done in reality more in the past, because right now we have a lot of helper function and so on, what you can do in this case, you can add event listeners to the window page. What does that mean? Is that when a given event is happening inside the window, it's going to trigger the function that we are going to define over here. So in this case, we are adding an event listener whenever the window is focused, so whenever the window is actually active, and blur instead, it's the opposite of focus. So when you blur something, you release the focus basically from it. And there are a lot of events, and they should be also typed over here, hopefully, if we have them as auto-completion, but no, sadly. But yeah, there are a lot of events. In this case, what this exercise does is that whenever we add this event listener to the window, so whenever we focus the window, we want to trigger this function and pass it through. Instead, when we blur the window, so when we are not interacting with the window anymore, we want to send false to the onFocus function. So in this case, we need to define the, in this case, what is passing it? Okay. So the add listener function takes a function as an argument. This is something that you can do in JavaScript, and yeah. And so typing a function as a parameter can be done in multiple ways. The easier way is doing it inline in this case. And so what you do is basically you type the function over here. So you say, okay, onFocus change is going to get a isFocus, for example, parameter, which is a Boolean. And it's going to return, in this case, nothing. Hopefully nothing. Okay, because this one's void. So basically we specified that the add listener function takes an onFocus change function on its own that gets an isFocus parameter, which is Boolean, and in this case returns void, because this function that we are passing over here, it's not returning anything. If in this case this was to, for example, return the, why I can't type today, the isFocused, this should give an error somewhere, but maybe since we passed the exercise, it's not checking anymore. Yeah, but you get the idea. In the case we change the return value, in this case from the void to Boolean. Void means nothing, basically. We can change it over here, and this would work at the same time. So let's remove this. And then we have the pretty much the same thing, but using a sync function. So we will go real fast with this as well. In this case, we have two functions. As you can see, this is how you would pass them using this notation over here, which is really brutal, but whatever. In this case, we have a create user and a get user. As we can see, the create user takes no parameters, so, and returns hopefully a user. I don't know, this wants it to be like this, as we did before. This is a function that gets no parameters and returns the promise of actually a string in this case, because the create user is going to return a user ID, and then the get user instead is a function that gets the user ID and returns a promise of a user. So it's the same that we did before. What we added instead is the result is no longer directly a string or a user, but it's a promise of a string and a promise of a user. So this was real fast, a really fast deep dive into how TypeScript works and what the types are and so on and so forth. And I know that maybe it can seem confusing to you if you have never used it, but if you have any questions, if you mainly to the ones that do not know JavaScript or TypeScript, if something is not clear, let me know, because we are going to move on to something which is more complex, but it's basically, it's programming. So if you understand the programming language, you will get to work basically also with the framework. So if you have any question, feel free. I will ask them. I do not eat people yet. Amazing. So as I said at the start, we're going to see the beginner's TypeScript examples, which were really easy. Instead, we're going to go to the React and TypeScript ones. As I said before, why React? Because, as I said, if you are looking into working into front-end development, whether it's Web 2 or Web 3, React is still, in my opinion, and I said it's my personal opinion, it's the best framework, both to start with and to start developing also really complex projects. You can do some easy stuff with it, but you can do also complex stuff using animations and so on and so forth. So we have the same logic as before. We have all these. Hopefully, there are some exercises. There should be exercises, I think, in the. Okay, in the components, there are some. Let me just see 1 second because I did not check this in advance if we can do them over here. Yeah, okay. Just give me 1 second. I'm thinking on how to structure this one. I don't know if to start from here or maybe from in general web development, but no, okay. Yeah, so let's start with React, but more in general with the concept of web development. So as I was saying before, JavaScript code can be run both in the browser and in the backend. Of course, you can type your own JavaScript code and your own HTML and so on, and just basically start developing on it. You do not need any kind of framework. You do not really need React or Next.js to develop something, but of course, frameworks exist to help you build more complex applications. In regards of what actually a web page is, I wanted to show you. If you go on your browser and you inspect the content of a web page, what you actually see is this. Like, this is how it gets rendered. Like, you have this really cool website with the video and so on, but in reality what it is behind the hood is just a huge HTML file, which I wanted to open, okay, like this. So the browser is capable of interpreting the three main components of any web page, which are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML, it's not properly a programming language, but it's rather a markup language. So a markup language like XML, for example, are languages that are used to define mainly the structure of something. In this case, the structure of a web page. So HTML is used to create the structure, to define where the objects should be placed at the start, and so on and so forth. And CSS instead stands for cascading style sheets. And basically, CSS is what makes a page beautiful. So it's all the styles, the colors, and so on and so forth. You can also do animations as well with CSS. And the last component, which was what we were looking until right now, is JavaScript. Instead, JavaScript adds the logic to the page. So whenever you click a button, whenever you, I don't know, you scroll somewhere, or whenever you focus an input, a textual input, something happens, and so on and so forth. So we have HTML for the structure, CSS for the design and for the graphic, and then JavaScript for the logic. When the web started, we had this really ugly. Let me see if we can find some screenshots of really old really old websites, like this one this was Yahoo. It was really ugly, and not only ugly, but they were not really functional. Why? Because we started, as it's saying over here, basically it was plain HTML, and plain HTML is just ugly. What does that mean? Is that if I can, let me just do something real fast. Just wanted to show you something regarding HTML for the ones that have never seen it. So HTML looks a little bit, I'm going to zoom, no worries. So this is the basic structure of HTML, which is the doc type HTML can be put and can also be avoided, but whatever, it's better to specify it. And then HTML works by using tags. So tags are basically you define what the element is, and then you need to close it on the other side in the case the element contains other elements. So in this case, the HTML element, it's always the root element of any HTML document. And as I'm showing to you, HTML as any other language, even if it's not a programming language, is just basically text. And then you have these other two main elements, which are the head and the body. The head, it's an element where you define the metadata of the page. So whatever you put inside the head, it's not actually shown in the content of the page, but rather it's in the head you put, for example, the title that shows in the browser, or you can put some special elements that whenever you share this page on Twitter, for example, is going to show a particular image, or when you share it on Facebook, shows another image, and so on and so forth. So in this case, we can, to give the title to the page, we have this title element, and here we can say, for example, Urbe Campus 2024. And what's really cool about HTML is that you can actually open it as a file, and as you can see, since the body it's empty, the page is empty, but you can see the title over here, which is Urbe Campus 2024. And if I change it to, I don't know, to ETHRome 2024, and I save it and I refresh, the title the title of the page changes. So this head is used for everything which is outside of the content. Instead, for the body contains everything that gets shown in the page itself. And here there are a lot of different elements. We are not going to see all of them for whoever is not familiar with HTML, but there are some elements which are going to be used the most, and which are, for example, H1s, or basically any H element. As you can see, we have different ones, and you go from 1 to 6, and it's more of a matter of importance inside the page. So the H1 is the more important, so it should be always the biggest. H2 is the second one, and so on and so forth. So if we put Urbe Campus 2024, example H2, and we refresh this page, you can see that H1 is the biggest one, H2 is the second, and you can imagine what comes if we put H3 as well. So it's an order of importance, and when you're going to use them inside also a framework, remember that if you're starting with it, you can also forget it, but when you start becoming more and more used to front-end development, these elements are also used by third-party softwares that help, for example, people that have accessibility issues, or maybe blind people, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of ways that you can help them to better read your page, even if they are, for example, not able to see or if they are visually impaired. There are softwares that read the tags, and then based on your tags, they're going to give emphasis to the page itself. So please do not use H1s like text. Okay, so let's give importance to any to all the elements. Another element is the P, which P stands for paragraph, which is basically text, which is the plain text. Let me zoom in so you can understand. So you have paragraph, and these are the main ones that are used for text. You can also, there's also this one which is called the span, and basically span, it's an element that can be put inside. It can be put everywhere, but the core logic is that it's getting put inside any other paragraph, and basically allows you to do some cool stuff, like for example changing the boldness of the text only for that given for that given part of the paragraph. In this case, it's not going to change the boldness, because if we want to change it, we need to use the B, which stands for bold, and in this case text gets bold. But you will never use, in my opinion, these ones if you're using any kind of framework or style sheet as well. So we can ignore this one. I'm giving you, I know that maybe someone of you already knows HTML, but I need to have everybody on the same line. Otherwise, when we're going to do the React stuff and the Next.js stuff, it's going to get messy. So let's keep it like this, because there's also this div element. So the div, as it says over here, it's an element that has no special meaning. And so you could use it basically for everything. It's not the best, because, for example, if you are creating a section inside your web page, you should be using the section element. But basically, the section and the div can, like the div can act also as a session and as a section, sorry, and so on and so forth. So the div, let's keep it as a generic element that can contain other elements. In this case, we have this subheading and this another paragraph are contained inside the div. So this is basically real fast how HTML works, and I wanted to introduce you to this kind of notation using this using the HTML elements. And also, I want to show you this as well. When an element does not contain any child, in this case it's the BR, which basically represents a line break, you can, instead of having it like, like this, okay, this works in the same way, you can close it like this. So it's a shortcut basically to tell them that it's going to be closed like this. And this notation is useful because for what we are going to see after in React, what React allows us to do is create new elements, which are called components, which are going to be based on this kind of structure. So using React, we are going to create these components, which will be containers of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS code. Instead, regarding CSS it's way more complex than any kind of, like, in my opinion, is the most complex one to understand and to master. So in reality, I do not really want to talk about CSS because otherwise it would get pretty boring. But I want to show you something that it's like, when it came out, it wasn't really loved by the front end community, because there has always been this concept that you are a good web developer if you can write your own CSS. So if you are able to create like these crazy files with all types of colors and stuff. But the more that the time has went on, a lot of frameworks like CSS frameworks came out that allowed people to use and style their website in a more easier way. And Tailwind, in my opinion, is it's the best one and it's the easiest one, because Tailwind uses the concept of classes. So basically, in HTML, which is something that I need to explain you can, like, any element can have multiple properties, as you would have, for example, in a JavaScript object. And one of these properties is the class. So basically, a class is just a string, basically. And inside this string, you can define one or more classes. Classes are basically just names that you give to CSS classes. And a CSS class uh, is an is an object that contains one or multiple styles. For example, a class can contain the definition that all the elements that have this class. I think it's easier if I show you without using it. But for example, I'm going to use this font bold class. This is how you define a class in CSS. So using this dot notation. So this is a simple class, and this is, if I want to create this class to say, okay, all the elements that have this class, the weight of the font, so how the font is going to look, needs to be bold. So in this case, there's this property, let's call it CSS property, which is called font weight, and I'm going to say bold. Okay, so I've just created this CSS class, and in order to apply a class or multiple classes to an HTML element, I just need to specify over here. Of course, I would need to also import the style sheet containing the CSS, and this is how you do it. So basically, you use the link element, and you say that I'm going to link a style sheet, and the href, which is basically where it's located, is going to be index.css. You could also type it like this, so it's relative, so it's better. And if we go, in this case, the h1, it's already bold, so we will not see any change. But if we say class font bold here, for example, as you can see, the paragraph has changed. So we just assigned paragraph not bold, and this is the paragraph bold. As you can see, using classes, I've just assigned this. So Tailwind basically takes this concept of classes to another level, and basically provides you already with a lot of utilities and classes that you can use to build pretty much whatever you want. So you still need to understand how CSS works to a certain degree, but at the same time, you are not the one creating the classes. So if I go over here and search, for example, for font weight, I have already all the classes ready. So when I use Tailwind, I can just, of course, there's all a matter of importing Tailwind in your project and so on, but we're going to see that, I don't think today, but tomorrow. I think it's already available inside Scaffoldit, but using classes via Tailwind, basically you have all the proper, basically, utilities of whatever you need. So in case you want a font to be bold, you already have the class ready. If you want to, I don't know, align the text to the center, in this case, we already have the text center. And basically you get the point without me going through all the different, basically, possible classes. So this is something that I would like you, if you take a look into it, mainly by understanding not the, yeah.
So basically, when you go to VS Code,
Yeah,
so you just write into the HTML in the class, you write like the Tailwind class
like this.
without writing the CSS. Basically.
Yeah, so basically, if I want this thing thing to be font bold, text center. I want the text to be 24 pixel and so on. I can type it right here.
You skip the CSS.
Yeah, so basically I skip all the CSS. Yeah, so basically you type it like directly in the code, which of course it's not the best because because you will start getting, for example, let me,
If you have like two paragraphs, one under the other, you have to write again all the thing.
yeah,
And while the class, you could reuse it.
yes. So that's the main the main point. I want to show you something. Let me see where I can get it. For example, the builders garden web. Okay, so this is how basically. Hopefully you can see. So as you can see, it can become something complex. Okay, so for example, here, just to give you an idea, this means that I have a padding on the horizontal axis, so it's a px of 12, and this notation over here means that when the screen is from medium to large, so when I'm, for example, on a laptop, or I think that an iPad should be SM. So when I'm on a laptop or on a big screen, the padding is bigger, it becomes 16. Like doing this stuff, if I was to do it via CSS, it would get me a lot of time because I will need to pretty much recreate what has already been done. And as I said, it's messy, but thankfully, hopefully,
Can't you like create a class like for all those settings? Like
you could
create a class paragraph that has all of those things.
you could create
Like class paragraph.
yeah, you could create some custom classes and some custom styles, but
But that's would be
the fact is that at the start it can seem like strange to be writing this really long stuff about whatever this is, margin and so on, but when you start getting used to it and really understand what you're doing with it, it really speeds up the development. I'm not saying that it's better or that it's worse than CSS, because it has its pros and its cons. I personally like it more because since I'm not really a design guy, so I work more on the front end. I can do designs, but in if I could do designs, maybe I would work more on the CSS because it's easier, for example, to use some softwares where you can design a web page like Figma, for example, and then export the CSS and so on. But if you are more on the developer point of view and you are over here, like creating sections and stuff and code, being able to type directly what you want inside the same element without needing to go to the CSS and then re-import it and so on, it's better. And then um, something that has allowed more people to use Tailwind instead of plain CSS is the fact that, as I was saying before, instead of reusing classes using CSS, by using frameworks like React, you could start reusing components. So instead of basically, let me show you, this is something that we will see right now. Hopefully I have something over here. So this may seem overwhelming, but bear with me for 1 second. I'm just going to show you. This is the website that I was showing you the code. Okay, so in this case, this file over here, this HTML, this long stuff, okay, is this element over here of the page. Okay, in HTML, if I wanted to if I was using basically HTML or JavaScript, HTML and CSS, because you could do it with JavaScript, because it's actually what I'm doing right here. But if I was using plain HTML and CSS, I would need to basically create 7 elements and repeat all the Tailwind stuff. So what you were saying before was right. But basically, by using React or JavaScript, I can create the single component and then repeat it. So the repetition is, instead of being at a class level or a styling level, you can remove it by basically creating components that share the same style, and the style is actually written as Tailwind. So in this case, I have this theme card, and then, as I said, this is React notation, but this is a React component, and React components are functions that return HTML. Actually, they return JSX or TSX, which is an extension of basically HTML, because you can have JavaScript or TypeScript inside of it. And in this case, by using React components, I can pass a member object, which was what I was showing you before. And a member object in this case is a name, a description, a Twitter forecaster, and image. And then this theme card is then used over here to basically show all the members of the team. So I'm not actually repeating the style in some way. So I'm creating it once. So I'm kind of like mitigating that problem that you were saying, because if multiple stuff share the same style, you would get real messy. So that's why frameworks like React come to help, basically, because now I don't need to repeat it for a lot of files, because I can always reuse this theme card component pretty much everywhere. And so I wanted to share you the Tailwind link, because so that you can see, all of you, if maybe there should be something. Yeah, I will just plain share you this one. Are you on Discord, right? Okay. So I will share you this one so that you can take a look into it. Because, as I said, it's the most used one, and if you are starting with front-end development, you don't need to start and get your head around CSS, because otherwise it would take you a lot of time. So it's better to understand some concepts of CSS, which are mainly how to basically lay out a page, how to use containers, how to use columns, grids, and so on and so forth, and then use Tailwind. Use Tailwind, basically. That's my gist. So, as I said, HTML, CSS, and yeah, we're going to see JavaScript, but I don't want to talk about JavaScript inside HTML, because it's kind of boring. Like, I can give you a rough idea on how it works, how the actual JavaScript is, how JavaScript works inside of a web page. In this case, we have the website that I was showing you before, and as you can see, there's all these script tags, as you can see, and as you can imagine, script tags is where JavaScript lives in the browser. So if I wanted to do over here some JavaScript, I could completely type it over here. And if I go on the page now, I just basically said log in the browser this hello world. If I refresh the page, I can see in my console the hello world. So basically, JavaScript lives inside script tags, multiple script tags. And when you use a framework, in the case of Next over here, well, Next is a little bit more complicated because it uses chunks and complex stuff. So let me see if I can find something that does not use Next. Let me see just 1 second if we have something. you have something which is plain React, but I don't think so. No, whatever. So let's ignore basically Next. But so frameworks, what they do is they allow you to develop, as I said before, mainly component stuff. Let's talk about React. You are going to develop these components. You're going to develop pages, which basically are components themselves, but they contain all the other components that you've developed. You can add logic inside components and so on. And frameworks usually, without usually actually, they basically at the end of the day, the result of a framework, like the output of the framework, is an HTML page. Okay, so it's an HTML page where basically the script that the framework is going to create is the one that is going to be responsible for handling all the logic that you've written. So the click of the buttons, the switch of the pages, and so on and so forth. And I really wanted to show you, but I don't remember how to find it. Maybe if I go over here, maybe this. No, because this is Next as well. Too many people using Next, sadly, but okay, yeah. So I think that we can have a break right now, and then we will start looking into the React stuff. And if you don't have any questions, of course, we will start seeing how React works. And yeah, you can go in peace. So I've sent in the Discord this GitHub page, this one, the NVM SH one. If you open it, you will go to this page. You will need to install this NVM, which is basically a tool to install npm and node and everything that needs to be installed to create and to run, for example, React apps, or in this case, Next.js apps. We're going to use directly Next.js, which is, I will explain you what Next.js is, but the front-end part of Next.js is done in React. So by developing on Next, we are also going to see some React concepts. So please use these scripts, like follow this guide here to install NVM. And
Do you recommend using like Unix based or like both fine with Windows?
okay, because you have Windows.
Yeah, but I have Orbulo, so I can just reboot into Ubuntu.
It's better to use Linux, in my opinion, than Windows. There should be NVM on Windows, but like I've never done it, so I don't know. Maybe it's over here, but yeah, no, it doesn't. It's better to use Linux, yeah. The link is, as I said before, on Discord, is this one. So you can open it from Discord and you will go to this page. If you get a command not found, make sure to use the source command on your terminal on Linux and also on macOS. So if you have some problems, you have the troubleshooting below, but shouldn't have any problem, hopefully. everybody done it? Yes, no?
Only they got format we have to.
Yeah, and then you need to try and use NVM, like check if it works basically, if you have it installed or not. When you have it installed, NVM install. When you have it installed, you need to run this command, which is nvm install node. It's going to install you the latest version of Node on your computer. And when this is done, you should be able to type both node and npm as well. These two commands over here. After you have done the nvm install node. Should come with node. So if when you install node, you should also get npm. It stands for Node Package Manager. Ah, okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You need to use. Let me see. Yeah.
Abbiamo fatto il curl, però quando scriviamo NVM
What state su Linux?
sì.
Cioè, avete fatto questo?
Ah no, credo soltanto che abbia altre.
Ok. So nvm install node, nvm use node, and then you should be able to use both node and npm commands. So this basically node is the framework that allows you to run JavaScript code in the backend, while npm instead is used to install all the different packages inside a JavaScript project, basically. So I will add the commands over here. nvm install node, nvm use node. These commands. Abbiamo installato Node, che serve per principalmente eseguire codice JavaScript, quindi è diciamo l'interprete, framework, e npm invece serve per installare i pacchetti all'interno di progetti Node, JavaScript comunque. Everybody, any issues? I'm going to type another command. I will put it on Discord and then show it over here we are going to call it, let me see, okay, so let's call it, I've sent this command also on Discord. This execute it please in a folder where like you have your projects or whatever. Don't of course create it anywhere. But what this command does is basically is going to create a Next.js application with this name. In this case, it's Frontend Workshop. It's going to use TypeScript and it's going to use ESLint, which it's basically a way to, it's a plugin, you may call it, it's a library actually for TypeScript that allows us to develop better code basically. So it enforces us some styling, some commas and stuff like that. So, but no worries. So when you have everything installed, both Node, npm and nvm, you should be able to run this command. And this is going to create the Next.js project for us. So we're going to click OK to proceed and just press enter to any option. So don't add anything else. So it's yes, no, as you can see from over here. As you can see, we have React even if we are using Next.js. So while we wait for this, I'm going to talk a little bit about Next.js. Next.js.org should be the website. Okay, so basically Next.js is a front-end framework, but it's actually not only a front-end framework, it's also a back-end framework. So we may call it a full-stack framework. So it allows you to both develop front ends, back ends, and of course at the same time front ends and back ends. So it's really useful because it uses JavaScript for both the back end and for the front end. And for the front end, as I already mentioned many times, it uses React components to build the web pages and so on and so forth. So once you know JavaScript, while using Next.js, you can basically build whatever you want. And nowadays it has become pretty much the standard, also because it's an open source project, but no, actually it's not really open source, but it's been developed by this company, which is called Vercel. And I will type it. This in the case are my projects, but let me see if I can go to the Vercel website. So Vercel is this company that has developed this Next.js framework, and what's really cool about Vercel is that it allows you to deploy your Next.js applications. So in a matter of minutes, after you develop something and it's ready, you can publish it on Vercel. You will get your own domain and stuff. Of course not, you will get a Vercel subdomain, but it will be published on the internet. So basically, whenever you finish something, you can put it up real fast, and it's optimized, of course, for Next.js because they developed it. So it's really useful. So even for prototypes, for playing around with it, and so on and so forth. It also has some paid features, but we don't want to talk about them. So everybody did run this command. Everybody has this front-end workshop created. If you're checking for the command, it's available on Discord.
It's asking, would you like to customize the default import alias? What is that supposed to mean?
The alias, it's no. It's yes, no, yes, no. So it's for the last question is no. You could just spam enter and it should work.
I'm just curious what it means.
So the import alias is when you...
So you can use the import statement for the root or?
Yeah, so it's really nice because basically I don't think it's available anywhere here because this is empty, but if we add another folder over here and we wanted to import something, we could use the @ sign for the root, or you could change it to whatever you want. I always keep it to the @ sign because it's more common. So yeah. Let me get. So we all have the Next.js application. So Next.js works by using something which is called a file system router. So basically you define the pages of, let's go back. First of all, let's start the app so that you can see it running on your browser. In order to run it, you need to execute npm run. Let me clear this one. You can run npm run dev in your terminal inside, of course, the folder of your project. And this is going to start the local server of your Next.js app. This is a development server, and it's really cool because it has a feature which is called hot reload. So basically, whenever you do some changes to your code, the server is going to restart automatically, and then you can, like, you don't need to stop the server and restart it every time. So after you run the npm run dev, you can open your browser at localhost 3000, and you should see this page over here. I don't know what's happening. So you have this page, and the first thing that we need to talk about is how Next.js handles the routing of the. Okay, so it keeps going. Amazing. Fantasia. Okay, so what I was saying, so basically Next.js uses something called a file system router to define pages. What does that mean is that we have this app folder, as you can see, and the app folder, you need to imagine it as the root of all your pages. So in the app corresponds to the in this case to the slash. Okay, so if we were writing, for example, localhost column 3000 slash, it corresponds to this page. If I were to add, for example, you do not need to do it, it's just to show you what I mean. If I create, for example, a dashboard folder, and I actually I can copy the entire page, and if I put a page.tsx inside this dashboard, if I go to /dashboard, it's going to show me the same page. So basically, the structure of your website is defined by how you create these folders. Okay, and of course you can use also something which are called dynamic routes, which are defined in this way, which could be, for example, let's say, for example, products. I can create a folder called, for example, product ID, and now just to show you what I mean, I can go to products. This would be the ID of the product, for example, and as you can see, I still have the same page because I just copy and pasted the home. But if I delete pretty much everything from here, you would see an empty page. So this is what a file system router basically does. So you create the folders. Yeah, I'll finish 1 second. You create the folders, and the folders define the path of the app. Yeah.
Sorry, how can I get to that page? Because I don't know how to do it.
I just copied this page.tsx file, but as I said, it's just to show you you do not need to do it. But basically, the idea is that you create these folders. The folder that you create, for example, dashboard is the path in the browser, and inside that folder there needs to be a page.tsx where you actually create the component for that given page. Also, there are some custom, or I don't know, maybe special is better, components. In this case, there's the layout component, and the layout component, as the name suggests, basically provides a layout for all the pages that are in that given folder. So let me delete this dashboard because it's useless right now, and also these products. In this case, like starting from a plain app, like this, we start with a layout tsx and a page.tsx. In the layout, as you can see, we have the HTML embody elements, because as I was saying before, and in the case you missed it, basically React, and in this case Next.js that uses React, allows you to create components. Components are functions or classes, but let's keep it simple and remain with functions. It's better to always create functional components. Basically, components are functions that return HTML. It's not properly HTML. It's actually, in this case, it's TSX, which is an enhanced version of HTML, because you can use some custom syntax. You can do some interpolation like this, for example. This is something that you cannot do in basic HTML, so it's an extension. And one main difference that you have between React TSX and plain HTML is that the class attribute the class property that we were seeing before in React is called class name. So that's the only difference. As you can see, this works in the same way, but in React is called class name. There's a whole history behind it, and it's basically on how React works, but let's assume that they are the same, and when you work with React, just use class name instead of class, because class is actually ignored. And so yeah, as you can see, what we installed, like this basically starter, is a Next.js plus Tailwind starter, because it was taken from this page that it's available on Discord over here. You have this page, and after we execute this command, we need to perform the setup of Tailwind. This is something that we will not do tomorrow when we are going to use the scaffoldeth, because scaffoldeth, which is that framework that I was telling you at the start of the lesson, is the one that has all the Web3 stuff already installed and so on. It also comes with Tailwind, but in this case you need to perform these other two commands and some other configuration. It's really fast, so you can do it. You can stop the server and install these libraries as well. Should be fast, as I said. And then I will explain you what all of this does. Where is it? Okay, no, just wait a second. I think that it's already available. No. Just give me 1 second. No, okay. Yeah, Tailwind was already installed. Okay, no. You do not need to perform these two. These ones, if you already installed them, there's no worries. You will find an extra file, this tailwind.config.js. You can delete it in the case you have already, like you followed the installation, and also this post CSS config.js. You can delete those because you should have already them. You should already have the MJS and the TS file. So yeah, I think that they need to update this guide because it should be updated. So it's actually already set up, so it's amazing. And let's start talking about a little bit about React components and how they work. So what we're going to do is we're going to create outside of the app folder, because as I was saying before, everything that gets created, like the folders that gets created under the app, are for the file system router. So it's how it's all the pages of your app. So we're going to create outside there. So in the root of our project, we're going to create a components folder. And in this case, let's start creating the, for example, the header of our website. Okay. So we're going to create an header.tsx file. So as I was saying, components in React are functions. So, and components always start with a capital letter. So wherever there's no component that can start with a lowercase letter. So in this case, we are going to create something like this. This is how you create functions in JavaScript. You could do it also. You could do it also like this. These two are actively the same. I prefer this one because I think that it looks prettier, in my opinion. And what we need to do is export this component from this file, okay? Because, of course, without the export keyword, this component only lives inside this page. We cannot import it from other pages, so it would be useless. So we're going to add the export keyword at the start. So if we go back on our home, we can pretty much, you can delete everything, completely delete everything, and just add an empty div like this. To show you the real power of components, what we are going to do is we are going to import a component inside our page as if it was an HTML element. And this is what I was saying before. So basically I have the, so this definition over here basically created as if it was a new HTML element, but in reality it's, as I said, a React component. And if we go on our page, of course the server now is stopped, I need to rerun it. If we go on the elements, ignore all these scripts and stuff, we have a div, which is this one, and then we have this header, which is actually a div, and as you can see, we have another div inside. So what we're doing is basically creating this scaffolding of HTML elements. And to show you, if we add a class name, for example, header in this case, it's just to show you this is actually our header. So React is capable of recreating the HTML of the page alongside with the scripts, the JavaScript, and so on. The styles and so on, and it recreates completely the HTML page. What it's really useful about components is that, as you may imagine, they can be reused in multiple pages. So for example, if you want your header to be available on your home page, but also on your about page, you could import it in both. But actually the best way when using, for example, like when creating an header, for example, is to import it in the layout, because the layout is it's a functional component that it's executed before all of its children. In this case, the children, it's just the page, so the home page. So what we could do is instead is instead of importing it directly in the page, we're going to put it inside the layout. So all the pages that will share this layout will have the header. Okay? Hopefully it makes sense. So you have a layout, which is the footer, and then you have the page, and you can also have, as I showed you before, multiple pages. All the pages inside the folders will share the same layout, so all the pages will have the header. As you can see, the header right now is no longer inside the div, but it's actually outside. Okay, so it's right after the body. Okay, so what we can do right now is something that I want to show you, which is also more React related rather than the styling, because I think it's more useful for what we need to do tomorrow. So I'm going to get, okay. So React has a really important concept, which is called hooks. So hooks are basically functions that you call inside your components, and they do all different kind of stuff. There are a lot of different, oops, zoom too much. There are a lot of different hooks, and each hook has its own uses and so on, but the most used ones are useEffect, useMemo, useRef, and useState. So we're going to see them one by one, so I can show you real fast how they work. So the first one that we're going to use is the useState hook. And as the name suggests, the useState is used to manage the state of something inside your component. In this case, we are going to say, for example, counter, set counter, and we are going to import the useState hook. So as I said before, it's a function. In this case, it gets a starting value, because we want to implement a counter in this case. And this notation over here is a shortcut, basically, because the useState function actually returns an array of results. By using this notation, using the square brackets, we are going to say that the first parameter is counter, which is the value that is going to be increased starting from 0. And then there's the set counter function, which instead is the function that is going to modify the state of such counter. And the useState is used pretty much in any React application. And we're going to create a really simple button by using the button tag. We're going to call it increase. And we're going to create also this h1 element that contains, in React we use the curly brackets to do interpolation, so basically to inject in the page the value of something in the form of a string. In this case, we are going to inject the value of counter, so 0 is going to appear. Yeah, sorry, a little thing that I've missed. In Next.js, since it's a framework that can manage both client and server-side stuff, you need to define which components are executed on the client only. We're going to see this more tomorrow, but bear with me, you need to add this useClient directive on top, and this tells Next.js that this is a client-only component, because you cannot use React hooks in the server, because of course React is a front-end framework, so you need to specify the useClient, and this should work. And as you can see, we have the counter at 0, and we have this button increase, okay? Which is what we did over here. So what I've added here is an on-click. So in React, all the elements, but yeah, all the elements have a lot of on functions. These on functions are basically like on properties, sorry. And on all these on properties, you can assign functions. What does it mean? Is that for each of these events, because are actually events that happen in the browser, for example, on focus, as we saw before, or on key down, which means when a keyboard gets pressed, but of course it doesn't work on buttons, and the on click, which is this one, allows us to do something whenever this button gets clicked, okay? So you pass a function, in this case it's an empty function. You could also get the event, but we don't need it right now.
Sorry, I was for look the components where is the routing?
The what, sorry?
How do I go header inside the page?
Ah, yeah, you just need to import it, and you import it from here. In this case, we are going to use the base root / component / header, and then you use it. What, sorry?
Only layout.
Yeah, only layout, and then it's going to be available everywhere. So the console log is console.log. It's the print of JavaScript, and in this case, it's going to log in the console of the browser. In order to open it, you can go to the should be tools, I think, tools, developer tools, and you can go in the console. You can clear using this button, and if I click, you can see that it's going to show increase counter. What we want to do, instead of course log in something, we want to actually increase the counter itself. So what we're going to say is that we're going to call the set counter function and pass it as a value, the current value of the counter plus 1. Okay, so every time the user clicks, the counter gets updated. Okay, so it's pretty easy. So we want to modify this value with this value over here, which is the counter plus 1. So every time I click counter, the counter is going to increase. Of course, this is something that lives only in the client and only for this particular session or page, because if I refresh, the counter goes back to 0. Okay, so there's no such persistence or whatever. There are some ways to have it, but it's still confined to the scope of the application. If you close and reopen the browser, this will not remain. So this is something, if I refresh, it goes away. And the use state is really powerful because, of course, you need to imagine it not only something to save a number, but for example, you could use something to store a first name of somebody. So in this case, we are going to define this as a. You can also pass the type, sorry, of the variable. As I said, it can be inferred, but it's always better to specify it. In this case, we are going to set this first name. And what it's really cool is that if you use an input, which is the HTML element for textual inputs, well, it can be text or it can be also numbers and so on. If you create, let's create it without anything and say enter your name. This is pretty plain input text, as you can see. We have the enter your name. I can type something over here, blah, blah, blah. What it's, if we add, for example, first name here, as you can see, first name does not get populated because we did not link it to any event. We are not calling the set first name and so on. So instead of using the onClick, of course, because when you type inside of an input text, you do not have any onClick. What we do is that we use the onChange. And the onChange, we are going to get an HTML, I don't remember the type, it should be, don't remember what's the type of this one. Whatever, without losing time, let's set it to any. And so the onChange instead, what it does is whenever the content of this input changes, do something, okay? In this case, there's this, we're going to use the event. I need to check what's the HTML input event. I don't remember the type of the event. Okay, so it's form event. Should be form event, right? Okay, so basically the onChange, it's used on elements that appear inside the form, so whether it's a checkbox, whether it's a radio button, an input, and so on. And in this case, this is going to, let me comment this, and I'm going to show you what the event actually looks like, so, and how it gets fired, basically. So if I clear this, whenever I'm typing something, I know that it's not showing the text, but hopefully you can see it. Anytime I add something inside this, it's going to log the event. Now, we do not to go deep into what this event is, but if we go to current target, if we log the current target of the event, which means the element that has triggered that given event, if I clear this, as you can see, this is the event. This is the target, which is our input field. And if we go to value, this is going to log what I'm typing, basically. And so by combining this e.currentTarget.value with the useState, so we remove this and we set the first name to whatever we are typing, basically. If I start typing, you can see that it gets replicated inside the first name variable. So this is useful, for example, when you're building a form, you can store all the different variables inside, all the different fields of the form inside a useState, and then, for example, use an onClick in a button to send it to your backend or to any kind of server and store it in a database, basically. So this was a pretty brief regarding the useState. Another really important hook in React is the use effect. The use effect does not return anything, and instead can take two parameters. The first one is a function, while the second one is called a dependency array. Let's start without any dependency array and see what this does. So use effect called. I'm going to clear this. And as you can see, whenever I do something, the use effect gets triggered. So if I increase the button, if I do something, this function is going to trigger. The dependency list, what it does is you can execute this function whenever one or more of the dependencies that you specified here change. So in this case, I want to call this function only when the counter changes, not when the first name changes. So when I enter, of course, gets called because the counter is 0, but now if I type, nothing happens. But if I click the button, the use effect is called. So it's something that gets called after something changes, basically. In this case, it's only for the counter. Instead, if you pass an empty array, which means not like this, because this means it gets triggered every time something changes. Instead, if you pass an empty array like this, the use effect gets called only when the component is mounted. Mounted, what does it mean? It means when the React and all the JavaScript has finally injected your component inside the page. So when the component appears actively in the page. In this case, it's called 2 times. but this is a matter of the development environment and so on. So actually in production, when the application is built, it's going to be called only once. So in development, sadly, it gets called twice. So now if I change this, nothing happens. And the power of use effect is it's mainly used in this form. So with an empty dependency array in order to do something when the component enters. So you can imagine like, I want to create this component that when it gets loaded inside the page, it recovers the user data from a database and then shows the user card, for example. So when the component gets mounted, I'm going to make a call to my server, to my backend. I'm going to retrieve the data, and when it's finished, okay, I'm going to store it inside my state. So let's imagine, for example, actually I can show you because I can use.
What DB do you recommend?
For front-end side, we do not have DBs, but you can. In my opinion, Postgres, if you want. Yeah, and okay, let's talk a little bit about. Since we are talking about Next, I'm going to show you also what's the powerful thing about Next being both front-end and back-end. So by following the same logic that I was saying before about the file system route, so basically there's a special folder name that if you put it inside app, it's going to enable the backend of your Next.js app. In fact, if you create a new folder inside app and call it API, and inside here you still follow the same file system route that I was saying before. In this case, I'm going to call it hello, and then I'm going to create a route.ts file. What I've basically done is I've defined the first API of my front end. I don't want to go too deep about it because this is mainly about front end, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create real fast an API so that we can return, for example, the first name, which is going to be Paolo. This is just to show you how to call from the front end. So, okay, so this should work. So if I go /API/hello, as you can see, this returns the object that I've just defined here. As I said, I won't go deeper on the API side because it's not on the scope, but as you can see, you can also do APIs with Next.js. And what it's really cool is that you can call the same APIs from your front end, okay? So you could do, in this case, fetch API hello. Then we're going to get the JSON, which is the result of the API, and then we're going to set. So basically what I'm doing is that I'm calling the /API hello, then I'm parsing the result into a JSON, which is the result of my API, and then I'm going to set the first name that comes inside the data, which is this one. I'm going to set it as Paolo. So as you can see, whenever I enter, the first name gets populated with the data coming from the API. So that's the powerful of the power of the use effect without any dependency. Of course, if this would have had any dependency inside its dependency array when I enter, yeah, now because it gets set to 0, but whenever I click, well, it doesn't show, but whenever I click, you can see that an API call gets made, basically. So whenever I increase, in this case, I'm calling my API. So we have the use effect, and the use counter, the use state and the use effect, which are the most important ones. There are some others that are more deep, and we do not need to look into them right now. As I was saying before, there's the use ref, which basically allows you to get the reference of an element, or there's also the use context, but there's no need right now to see these ones. But what is really cool about React is that you do not only use the default hooks, you can also create hooks on your own, because hooks are basically just functions. So since we can do pretty much everything, we can also create our own hooks. So if we create a folder and call it hooks, and let's call it use Paolo, use Urbe instead. This can be also. So, as I said, we can create our custom hooks. Custom hooks can be used to do whatever we want. So, for example, if we have inside our application, we do not want to every time fetch a given information or perform some kind of logic using JavaScript, we can basically bundle it inside our own hook and then just call our own hook pretty much everywhere. In order to show it to you really easy, we're going to create a function, as we were doing before, which is, in this case, it's return urbe, use urbe, sorry, which is the use urbe hook. And just real fast, it's just going to return urbe. Really easy. And so we could say urbe, it's going to be use urbe, and if we log it, of course, when we enter the page, it's going to set the value to urbe. You need to, of course, this is really easy, but if, for example, in every page we wanted to fetch the data of the user, we can basically copy this use effect over here. We can copy it and we can put it inside our use urbe hook. And here we can say, as we did before, the first name and the set first name, use state string, and in this case we can return, let's do it like this. So we have the, we're going to create also the set last name. This is just to show you. And here we can say set last name to the data last name, and we're going to return this stuff. So basically what I did here is I've copied the use effect before, and the use effect works in the same way. So whenever this hook, this use urbe hook gets mounted, it's going to call my API, it's going to retrieve the user data, and it's going to return an object containing the first name and the last name. And so I can basically, instead of doing all of this stuff over here, I can just simply delete all of these and say user is going to be use urbe. And instead of showing here, let's remove this one because it's no longer needed. I can get the user.firstName from my hook. And so if I go on the page, as you can see, it works the same way as before. So in whatever component I want to do this, it's going to work. So I can take this and put it inside the home page. Remember the use client directive. And I can show, again, as you can see, my name gets printed here because this is the header component. As you can see, this is the div.header, while instead this is the home page, and actually I'm basically not reduplicating the code, so it's always the same code. Yeah.
But when you wrote
The set functions are inside the hook, as you can see. So basically, I move them inside the hook. So instead of, yeah.
Because you have an error where when you use the set functions.
Where?
There. Because I think them must be implemented somewhere.
What must be implemented, sorry?
Set first name and set last name functions.
They are here.
I have the name, but
Puoi guardare tu.
no, it was the old. Ero con le vecchie, ora le
Okay. And so yeah, creating hooks is not something that you do, like, it depends. Of course, if you are creating libraries and if you want to speed up the development and also have cleaner code, is something that you do, but the most important thing is that libraries of hooks are really important, and they are basically the core of the Web3 development and also the Web2 one, but mainly in the Web3 development. And we're going to see them tomorrow, how by using the logic of hooks, we can interact with smart contracts and so on and so forth. So we saw these hooks. Something else that I wanted to show you. We saw the use state, use effect. Let me see if there's something here that we can. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this stuff. So this library over here that we're going to use tomorrow, which actually is the base of what we're going to use tomorrow, is built on. So it's called WAGMI. WAGMI, it's actually a slang in the Web3 that means we are gonna make it, which is really funny. And so basically WAGMI, it's a library that contains only hooks. So this is what I was saying before. So these are all hooks that you can use inside your application, in your dApp, to basically connect users, to send a transaction, to sign a message, to read data from a smart contract, to write contract, which means to interact with a Solidity function on a smart contract. And this library, I think, right now has become the standard, thankfully. And I want to see real fast. Have you deployed yesterday the smart contract with Fabrizio? Have you deployed it somewhere? Has Fabrizio put something on his library? Oleski network, okay. No, I wanted to see if he did put the address of the deployed smart contract somewhere, because I wanted to show you real fast the hooks, but I don't think we can show them. But we can do something. I'm going to deploy it real fast. Which is this one? No, this is a multi-send. Is this final assignment here, right? The contract that you deployed?
Yes.
Okay, so just real fast, I'm going to, or maybe we can get another one like this one. let's change to I don't think it's Sepolia, base Sepolia. Do I have any testnet here? Okay, should be on Oleski. Oleski. Why it's not? Whatever, it's not reading my wallet. Whatever, we are going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to deploy it on my own, and then you're all going to use the same contract. But so, just to give you a little glance of what we are going to see tomorrow. So tomorrow we are going to use this scaffold ETH here. So as I was saying before, scaffold ETH is based on Next.js. It uses WAGMI, it uses TypeScript, and you should have used, hopefully, Ardat. No, you didn't use Ardat, okay, whatever. And uses this framework for Solidity project, which is called Ardat, that you do not need to see tomorrow, but basically we are going to copy the Solidity code that you developed yesterday, and we are going to put it inside scaffold ETH. So what's really cool about scaffold ETH is that when you develop smart contracts, you can basically it basically generates you a simple front end where you can debug your smart contracts. So as you can see from the screen over here, this is all generated dynamically based on the code that you've written. So tomorrow here you will see what is it? For example, you will see the vote function and the extract winner, which is actually the only two functions that you have. And it's really powerful, and because it already comes with a lot of stuff already done and already customized on top of your smart contracts. What does that mean? Is that from a developer point of view, when you will, you will want to call the vote function, your IDE, in the case you are using, for example, VS Code or Cursor or whatever, any smart IDE, you're going to have automatic auto-completion of all the functions that your smart contract have, all the return values, and so on and so forth. And also you will have some useful components which will be already built that you will not need to basically develop from scratch. Like, for example, the address input component showing here, or the balance, which already reads the balance of the current connected address from the chain, and so on and so forth. And they will be at the hackathon, right, Limone? Beetle Guild will be at the hackathon, right? Yeah, they will have 3K. Yeah, they will have also a bounty for using scaffold ETH, so that's why I wanted to show it to you so that you can use it. And
what is a bounty?
So basically a bounty is in an hackathon. In the case, for example, for ETHRome, a bounty is a prize that a sponsor gives to the first winner or to the top three that they decide that have won, for example, their category. And it's based on, most of the times, on a task or a challenge that you need to do, or it can be easy as, for example, the best 3 projects that have used scaffold ETH are going to get $1,000 each, for example. So that's a bounty, basically. And they are offering $3K, and I don't know how they structure, I don't remember, maybe Limone knows, but, and they are going to give money to who uses scaffold ETH. And yeah, I think that they will also be there in person. So hopefully, Kevin is not going to be here. Austin? Eda? Okay. So you can come to me at the hackathon and no worries.
We cover more on
Yeah.
basics tomorrow. So tomorrow, like Paul will go more into like scaffold Git, and we will also have a session around how and what to expect as an hackathon, like what you should be doing, or how you should be doing it, some best practices and other stuff, so that you get prepared. You know what's a bounty, what's a workshop. There are mentors, for example. So tomorrow we will cover everything that will happen in the weekend.
Yeah, so I'm thinking what we can do right now, because we saw this stuff. Yeah, fuck it. Let's. How much time do we have left?
40 minutes.
Okay. 40 minutes we can. I don't think if it makes sense to create the scaffolding right now. Oops. The audio guy is gonna hate me. so yeah, didn't want to do it, but whatever. So if you go on scaffoldis.io, you have the same command over here, like similar to the one that we executed before for a next app. We're going to use the scaffolded command to create a new scaffolded project. So it should be npx create ETH latest. Of course, you need to install the package. Thankfully, he was out. And let's call it Urbe Campus. Urbe Campus. When it's going to ask you what Solidity framework do you want to use, select RDAT.
What's your opinion on that? I heard people say Foundry is better, it's the future.
It depends. So Foundry it's way more complicated. So it's not for beginners, and I would say not even intermediate, because it's everything is Solidity based, even tests. So you would need to write tests for Solidity. It supports a lot of complex stuff like fuzzing, which means like shaking things up, and so it depends. Like I prefer RDAT, especially in a context of an hackathon, because it's faster to use. And Foundry instead, since you need to write everything in Solidity, it can become messy. But yeah, so in my opinion, RDAT, but I always use RDAT, by the way.
So it's easier for beginners.
Yeah. It's way easier. I thought that you used it in the last 2 days, but like, taking a look at the Fabrizio repo, I don't see any. Yeah, I see RDAT here. So maybe he used something about RDAT. So I don't know, but whatever. Well, at this point, I can show it to you real fast. So once you have it installed, you have. It tells you that it requires yarn.
I don't have it, and I was out.
Yeah, so npm install yarn. So to install, you can execute this command here. In case it only uses yarn, you can use npm install -- global yarn, and it's going. So yarn, it's basically another npm package manager. It's faster, of course. It's not the best, but it's faster than npm, and someone prefers it to use it. So, and it's kind of fun that you need to use npm to install another npm packager, but whatever. So if it requires you to use yarn, you can install it from here. So npm install -- global yarn.
I have a question about Node.
Yeah.
I manually installed Node like 3 years ago on my computer, and now I try to update it and using npm. I have to remove the last version because actually have the 20-second version of Node if I execute the export and the MD blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But if I put that in my .csh file, I have a really lazy loading every time I open up a new terminal.
So you have installed MVM in the past, like Node in the past, and then you installed MVM basically?
Yeah. So it's better that I remove everything and I start again.
Yeah, it's always the best solution is to remove everything and restart from NVM. The good old reboot, but yeah, I would do it this way because I don't know what the problem.
It actually works if I every time we export NVM here, because either way my terminal doesn't recognize the command NVM.
Okay. No, yeah, in my opinion, you should uninstall it and reinstall it because it's because otherwise I just already know it's kind of slow. So just while you install stuff, I would just tell you a little bit about the structure of a scaffolded. So a scaffolded has these two packages inside. The one package is the Next.js app, and the second package is the Ardat project. As I was saying before, Ardat is a framework for developing and testing and deploying smart contracts. So here you can write your Solidity stuff. In this case, this is a greeting contract. And you can create some deployment scripts in TypeScript. Also, you can have some custom scripts over here. But the idea of this combination between Ardat and Next.js that they have done with Scaffolded is what I was saying before. Of basically, they will generate some TypeScript typings that we have seen earlier today, and based on these TypeScript typings, you will have some custom hooks and custom autocompletion and so on that will speed up the development of your project. So it should be around, I don't remember where it is. I think that let's go real fast to the GitHub of Scaffolded. No, not this one. This one. So when you install Scaffolded, like in this case, we use the git clone. Like we didn't use the git clone, we use the command, so we do not need to install anything. What is cool about Ardat is that instead of passing through Remix, which I really hate, if you want my opinion, I think Remix is one of the worst tools that the humans have ever created. And in Ardat, instead, what it's really cool is that you can use a command which actually spawns a local chain. So this is a local chain running on my PC. Of course, nothing is happening. It's not going to consume my hardware. It's not going to mine anything strange. And this is local and it's used for testing. Okay, so you do not need to start importing stuff, getting your tokens from somewhere, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to show it to you right now with the current smart contract that is the default one for Scaffolded, but tomorrow we are going to use the smart contract that you developed in the last days. So once you have the chain running, as you can see, these are all the accounts, the various private keys. You can actually connect to this chain using MetaMask if you want. If you put this URL and you put this private key, you will actually have 10,000 ETH, but you will not be rich because it's all fake. So if you run yarn deploy, what it does, it's going to compile this smart contract and it's going to deploy it. As you can see, these are all the various calls that have been done to my local blockchain. It's going to retrieve the accounts, blah, blah, blah. It's going to deploy the smart contract. So this is the address of the smart contract that has been deployed. And in this case, the deployment script also calls the greeting functions, but whatever. So as you can see, using Ardat, basically I was able to run a local chain and then deploy it. What is really cool about Ardat is that if you go in the Ardat config file, you actually have all the chains over here. So if I were to use my real private key, and which is this deployer private key, if I was to use this my private key and I was to choose, for example, mainnet, I would actually deploy this smart contract on mainnet or on Sepoly or Base or whatever chain. So it's also faster this way because you can just type yarn deploy, I think it's -- network and the name of the network, and it's going to actually deploy this smart contract over there using my funds. So I do prefer it rather than Remix. It takes a little bit of setup and time and understanding of how Ardat works, but we will see it real fast tomorrow. So as I said, we deployed this smart contract, and these are some logs and whatever. And as you can see, once Scaffold ETH finishes with the deployment of a smart contract, it's going to create this contract definition file. It's going to create it inside our Next.js app. If we follow this path, so Next.js contracts, deployed contracts, as you can see, we have this huge, strange object, which is actually composed of the chain ID, so the number that identifies the current chain that we are working on. In this case, it's a local chain and has this 31,337 ID. Your contract is just the name of the contract, really easy. And then we have the address where the contract is deployed, which you can see is the same matching here, 0x5f and blah, blah, blah. And then you have the ABI, which I think that Fabrizio told you about yesterday. So the ABI just has the specification of all the various functions. So once this was done, we can run the last command. So we've done yarn chain in one terminal window, then we have done yarn deploy, so we deployed the default smart contract, and then we are going to run yarn start. So yarn start, what it does, it's basically, it starts the Next.js app. So as you can see, we are calling Next.js, and it's going to create it on, like open it on the localhost 3000. It's going to load because it's a little bit slower than, of course, an empty Next.js project, but when it compiles for the first time, then the other times are faster. So this is the default page for Scaffold ETH, and as you can see, it gets already my connected address. In this case, it's connected. It's getting it from the wrong network because right now I'm on Ethereum with my wallet. But if I click on switch to Ardat, it's going to add. I'm using Rabbi, which is another browser wallet because I don't use MetaMask anymore. But it works the same with MetaMask. So if I click, I just clicked on switch to Ardat, and basically what it prompted me was to, I don't know where it went, but if I click on switch on Ardat, it's going to add the Ardat chain to my wallet. And then, as you can see, now I have 0 ETH because I'm not connected with my with any of these private keys over here. But what's really cool about Scaffold ETH is that I can grab funds from a faucet. So I just click over there and I get 1 ETH. Every time I click here, since I'm in the local Ardat chain, I'm just basically spawning money, as you can see. So it's really useful for you to test stuff. You just click here, you get the money, and then you do whatever you want. So by then, the home page is basically nothing. As you can see, it's just some widgets and stuff. But what it's really cool for you is the debug contracts page. In this case, we only have one contract, but as you can see, we have like this page is divided in, no, this is really ugly, so let's do it this way. So this page is divided in the, let's not use this. You have, of course, the name of the contract, the address where it was deployed. You have the balance of the contract and the network, of course. Then what you see over here are the public variables of the contract. So if we go real fast to the contract, we have owner, greeting, premium, total counter, which are greeting, owner, premium, and total counter. And then we have also this mapping, which is public, and a mapping is called like a function in Solidity. So in this case, we have this read function. And then we have two write functions, which are the set greeting and the withdraw. In this case, I'm not the owner, so I will not be able to withdraw. But if I take my address, for example, and I put it over here, if I click read, it's going to say 0. So there's no greeting for me. Nobody greeted me. But if I want, I can set a new greeting. So I can call it, like this is literally calling the smart contract. So if I say hello from Urbe Campus, in this case, I don't know how this smart contract works if I need to send something, but yeah, let's send. Just multiply by 1/18. Okay, hopefully this is going to send 1 ETH, but whatever. So this is calling the set greeting function, which is this one, and the set greeting has the new greeting variable, parameter, sorry, and then as the value that we need to send. And if I click send, as you can see, this is actually creating a transaction for me. This is a transaction directly on my wallet. I can sign it and I can confirm it. And the transaction has been created. And as you can see, it automatically updates the data. So you have the greeting that now has become hello from Urbe Campus. It's premium because I don't know what this contract does, but the total counter now it's 1. And if I call the user greeting counter, now my counter is 1 because I've sent 1 greeting. So you can see how it's a really useful tool for smart contract debugging, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about the smart contract debugging, and tomorrow we're going to see how to use the front-end hooks that Scaffoldit offers, because we do not have any time right now, so might as well show you the debug stuff. So it also shows you the transaction receipt directly over here, so you can take all this information, the hash, how much gas it used, and so on. And this is the withdraw function that I don't think I can use because, as you can see, I'm not the owner, so it directly tells me what it's wrong, basically. So it's really powerful, and what it's really cool is that if we change something in the smart contract, so let's add, you do not need to do this because it's not useful for you, but I just want to show you. If I add a function called hello that just returns hello world, for example, okay? If I stop this server and I say yarn deploy, now the smart contract has been deployed to a new address. It has updated my deployed contracts. If I go back to this page, when it loads, as you can see, the this I want to show you after. As you can see, the address has changed right now, so there's no longer the old smart contract, but there's the new one, which is 0x01, and also has the hello variable in this case because it's a pure function. But so it's really, in my opinion, the best tool to debug smart contracts for all these reasons. So I just want to update this one and say because I want to show you the last debug smart contract debug functionality of Scaffoldit. Let's call it building unstoppable Urbe Campus. I'm going to pay one. And what it's really nice is that it comes also with a block explorer functionality. So the block explorer functionality, in this case, it's connected to the local network, but it's useful for debugging purposes because you can see actually what happened. So in this case, what's it, like 3 minutes ago, I've called the setGreeting function on the 0xFB that was the old smart contract with this value. And then I've deployed another smart contract, I called the setGreeting function and so on. So it also has this cool functionality of Block Explorer. You can also, I think, filter from here. In this case, you can see all the transactions that have done to me. These are all the faucet transactions. So receiving money from the faucet or the calling of setGreeting in this case. I can also filter by smart contract. So if I paste over here and click on search, I can see all the transactions that have been done. This is the bytecode and the opcode. This is really deep, but you also have events. If any logs have been, events or logs have been emitted by the smart contracts. I don't know if you've seen events. Okay, so where they went. Okay, so yeah, I think that you get the point on why this is better than Remix, in my opinion. But yeah, if you have any question regarding this part of Scaffoldit, because tomorrow we're going to see how to play, because plain Scaffoldit like started in this way, it's just a debugging tool. But actually, since it's such a powerful debugging tool, we can use the various hooks and components that are available here in our advantage to actually build a front end. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow, basically. So if you have any question on the debug side or on Scaffoldit, let me know. No. You also have the price of ETH in case you need it, and the light mode enabled, so the switch of the theme. You also have a QR code. Like, you get the point. It's a starter for pretty much anything. So yeah, no questions. We're going to stare at each other for 15 minutes, I don't know. So yeah, what we can do maybe is, let me get the smart contract so that you can see. Let me remove this stuff. For simplicity, I'm going to call it your contract. I'm going to remove. As I said, there's no need for you to do this. It's just, we're going to do it tomorrow together just to pass a little bit time together. So I just basically changed all the code, and with the code of the smart contract that you did yesterday. Yeah, and of course, if I don't change the values, I need to pass a candidate. Yeah, so I can show you real fast how that works. So, as I said before, Ardat has the contracts code, which is Solidity, and then has the deploy scripts, which are TypeScript. Via the deploy scripts, you can deploy, as the name says, the smart contracts. Just to make it a little bit prettier for you, as you can see, it's really easy to deploy a smart contract. All this stuff, it's standard, so it's not really something strange to understand. But In this case, what we are doing is that we are deploying the your contract, which is the name of this smart contract in this case. From it's the deployer, which in a local environment, which is the one that we are using right now, it will be the first address over here, the first account. But if you're using your own private key, it's going to be the first address of your private key. Then the arguments that need to be passed to the smart contract. In this case, for your smart contract that you developed yesterday, it wants an array of candidates. So as the arguments are an array, I'm going to pass the address of the deployer as a candidate, and then I'm going to also add my address as well. And then log it's to print whenever it does something, and auto mine, you should always keep it because it basically sends the transaction and also mines it, so you do not need to wait pretty much anything. So now if I do a yarn deploy, hopefully it should work. If there's no bug in the smart contract, yeah, okay. So we basically deployed the smart contract that you did yesterday. And if we go back to the yarn start and to the, I'm getting blind, but right now, if I go on debug contracts, as you can see, everything has changed. And this is the smart contract that you did. You have the this extract winner, the owner, you have the candidates. You can call the first item of the array, the second one. In this case, it's me, because the first one, it's the owner. In this case, I've passed the same address, and then I've sent mine along with it, so it's right that it's me. And yeah. As you can see, I did not change anything in the front end. Everything is auto-generated in this case. So I think that it's really powerful. And also, you can, as before, I can vote basically for myself, because why not? As you can see, I can send the function, and now the winner, it's me, and I have one vote, and so on. So it's really easy also to debug smart contracts. And what I was saying before about the types generation is that Scaffoldit offers all these different hooks, which are like the main ones that we are going to see tomorrow are the use scaffold contract, the use scaffold read contract, and the use scaffold write contract, because these are the ones that allows us to interact with a given smart contract. But of course, there are others that are really useful, like the watch contract events that basically allows us to listen to all the events that happen on that given smart contract whenever they are emitted, basically. And just to see, should be on up. So I do not want to go into the mess of this page. So we're going to do it real fast on the home page. This is, again, we're going to go more in detail about this tomorrow, but I don't remember what's the return, but if I use, for example, use scaffold contract, what it's really cool about this hook is that I can pass the contract name, and as you can see, I already get auto-completion of the name of the smart contract that I'm working on. And if I add more, I of course would have more smart contracts, but in this case it's just one, which is called your contract, but it will be called simple voting tomorrow. And what's really powerful is that this, for example, this use scaffold contract is going to return the data. In this case, it's data. And if I log this data, I will get if I go on the home, I will get all the data related to my smart contract. So I get the ABI, I get these are functions to, for example, simulate transactions. I get the address and so on. And the same goes with the, let me comment this. The same goes for the other hooks that I was telling you before, for example, the write contract as well. It's really, oh no, this just gets your contract. And this one instead returns this returns two functions. Well, instead multiple functions, but it's a write function and a write contract. The write contract and write contract async, we are going to use always the async function. And what's cool about this function is that okay. Okay. And we have it. So, as I was saying, what's cool is that, for example, like the auto-completion, it's really powerful because it allows you to not perform any kind of error, which it's the hardest part when developing front-end in Web3, and we will see them tomorrow. A lot of the issues and the problems that may occur when developing a front-end that interacts with the blockchain. The first one is passing wrong parameters to the smart contract. So imagine, for example, that you develop a smart contract where people deposit 10,000, no, well, 10,000 of it is a lot, but they deposit a lot of money inside of this smart contract, okay? Imagine that when you perform the deposit, instead of depositing, I don't know, 1 ETH, you type something wrong and you deposit, I don't know, 10,000 ETH and stuff like that. So, of course, the user right now has a lot of ways to see what it happens with some more complex wallets, but in the past, it was not like this. So, performing some errors like this could end up in could end up in the user maybe losing a lot of money or interacting with the wrong smart contract or even just calling the wrong function. Sometimes it would cost money, and that's not good. But so just to show you, you get auto-completion for the name of the function. In this case, there's only one write function in our smart contract, which is vote, and you also get auto-completion for the arguments. In this case, it wants a string because an address is actually just a string. So this is, of course, not a right address, please. But yeah, you get the point. And the same goes with the use scaffold read contract. This should get the contract name, which is always your contract. And here we can pass as you can see, we have candidates, we have extract winner, we have owner. In this case, let's get owner because it does not have any arguments. And if I log data, inside my browser, you will see undefined until it's going to get the data, which is the owner of the smart contract. And if we go into debug contracts, we can see that it's the same, so 0xF39. So Scaffold ETH offers us these really cool hooks that we can use to interact with the smart contract we are developing. So we are going to use these kind of hooks tomorrow to build a custom front end on top of what you built yesterday. So it's going to be a simple voting app, so don't expect anything too complex, but we're going to use these hooks and these functions. And yeah, if you have any questions, please have some questions. If not, for me, you can go in peace. And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you guys for much.